What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court for today. I am Sean Murphy, joined as always by my guy Troy Sergey. But this is a special episode, folks. As you can probably already tell if you are watching this one, we have a legend in our midst, one of the best in the business, Johnny Kane, one of the voices of the Detroit Pistons, sideline reporter, game play-by-play commentator. You name it, Johnny does it. Mr. Kane, thank you so much for being here, man. It's great to see you.
It's good to see you guys. I appreciate that's a heck of an open right there. That's a nice welcome to the pod. So I appreciate it, man.
Hey, I appreciate it. I learn from the best, man. I try to observe and admire. I've been seeing George Blaha do his thing since I was like 6 or 7 years old. So when you have those types of role models in your midst, you gotta do your best to replicate it, man.
There you go. You're all over it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Johnny, it's great to see you. It's great to be talking because this is probably the most exciting time to be a Pistons fan since that 2005, 2006 area. If we're just talking about the hype and everything that's been going on, you've obviously been around the team for quite a few years now. What's the biggest difference about this team compared to some of the other ones that like you've been able to be around? Like, what do you think was some of the things that like maybe fans at home might not recognize that like, oh, this group was different than years past?
Yeah, that's a good question, man, because so I came in at the end of the 14-15 season. So my first full season was the 2015-16. And, when you have expectations attached to a team or an organization, it kind of changes your mindset going in, like from players, fans, coaches, everything. So this season, if we're being honest, there weren't any realistic expectations about, them being in contention. You still felt like they were probably 2-3 years away. Even if you were able to double your win total, that doesn't get you even flirting with the play-in opportunity, right? So, you just have what I would consider realistic expectations. Say, even if they double the win total, you're still looking at a 28-win team. Where does that put you? So going into the year, it's like, hey, great group of guys, right? New leadership with JB coming in. And I had known JB from, obviously we play Cleveland 4 times a year, but there were a lot of names that were, rumored to be in consideration for the head job. And, I didn't know him. So I knew, kind of what he was about. But you just don't know, you're coming from what happened at the end of last year, going into this new year. You always want to be hopeful, but 3 head coaches in 3 years, you're hoping for good things to happen. And as we've seen in other sports, maybe not to this level, but when you get the right voice in and the right mix of guys, and when the players on the roster, you can't always expect the guys to take steps forward collectively. And in some cases, like a Cade taking a leap forward, it was magic, like it was magical. So it was like this perfect blend of like new voice, health for the most part, until obviously Ivy went down. But it was like this total belief into like, hey, forget what's happened to this point. Let's just go play and let's follow the leadership in front of us. And it was one of the most incredible seasons it's the most incredible season I've ever been a part of with the Pistons. But in any sport, in all the sports that I've covered over 20 some odd years in the business, it's like that was electric,
Yeah.
And you just never know, so it's like no expectations. And you start to believe in yourself after maybe stumbling out of the gate in the first week, 2 weeks. And then it was like, wait a minute, we might have something here. And then they sustained that level of play. It was a blessing, man. The whole thing was a blessing,
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think like the biggest thing you could just tell that this season was different at the end is just like JB talked about in the last game after the press conference, how like this group was able to rejuvenate an entire fan base, and like reawaken a city in their love for a basketball team. And like, I could tell because I have my parents who hadn't watched since like 2008 or 2007 telling me that they were screaming and hollering at the TV like it was back in the day. But like, with all due respect to those, like that 2015 year, the 2015, 2016, like this just feels different because when you do have that budding young star with a young group that has so much room to grow, there is a different energy because there's just a hope that is a lot more palpable,
Yeah.
And to me, I'm not sure about you, but it's like when you have a guy like Cade, who not only is as good at what he does as he is, but also seemingly embodies and embraces the culture of the city so well. It just felt like all the stars aligned.
Yeah. And look, like anytime you get so if you get a 1 of 1, in any sport. It's like, first of all, the learning curve is abbreviated because everybody has such high expectations. And then you say, okay, is he somebody that truly embodies what we are as a whole, organizationally, as a fan base? And then you just hope that you get a guy like Cade. Now, I get it. This is a Pistons, centric podcast here. So it's like, yes, if we zoom out and say, well, that happens in other cities too. But for this city at this time, to have somebody like Cade Cunningham come in and be the face of the franchise, you couldn't ask for anything better. I mean, you really couldn't. He's like the most humble superstar I've been around, and he is a superstar now, and it was like because of the leap forward that he took. And obviously he was a great player in his first 3 seasons, but now he's into this different stratosphere. And he hasn't let it go to his head. Like, he's not a selfish player. You've been around him. It's like, of all the people that you could say, okay, who do we want to, hitch the wagon to? You're like, how about Deuce? Okay, that'll be good. And then he takes it and he's carrying the load, so that's it. I think there's hope because it's like, okay, this is a base level now. This is year 1 of the turnaround. How high can we go? As opposed to, hey, our window is short. We got to capitalized right now. Now you say, hey, look, man, this is what's possible. And this is the worst of what's possible, is a first round exit, that goes 6 games that very easily could have gone 7 games and maybe goes, a couple calls go the other way. Maybe you're into the second round. So yeah, it's incredible, man. Like you mentioned about your parents and stuff, like my mom's text me every night during the game, I can't breathe,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, I get it. I'm here and I'm feeling the same way.
Yep, exactly.
Johnny, a little bit, talk about the maturity aspect of Cade. I mean, we obviously, as fans and people who watch the team pretty closely, can see that he's different than, your typical guy, this early on in his career. But what things have you seen personally in the locker room, being around the team, that really makes him such a special guy to be the face of your franchise?
Yeah, honest to God, I think, a lot of it's like in your upbringing, like we were just, mentioning our parents and stuff. It's like, I've met his mom and dad. I'm pretty close with his brother, cause he comes to every game.
Cannon's awesome.
Yeah. Cannon's great. It's like, he just comes from a grounded family, and leadership is tough, man. There's a lot of people that I think if you say you're the guy and you say, yeah, okay. It's like, if you're running a podcast, you're okay, you're in charge. You're like, okay. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, and then when you have a full team around you and a full city behind you, can you sustain that level of attention, adulation, criticism, and the leadership that comes with that every night? You have to be elite every night, right? There's no days off. Like, you're the franchise guy. Can you handle it? And you say, like, I'm 23 years old. Yeah, I got it. The way he operates is like, he can handle it, and he embraces that. You like watch the way he plays. He never gets sped up. You ever listen to him talk? It's always very measured. It's just all in his upbringing. It's in his DNA, and not everybody's that way. And not all leaders obviously are wired the same way. I just feel like his particular style meshes so well with the vets that you bring in, where doesn't feel threatened by someone who's been there and done that, like a Tobias. And obviously Tobias is not that type of guy that would come in and say like that, I'll run the show here. Or a Tim Hardaway, played in the finals last year and is a fabulous player, and then these other young rookies, you say, hey, I'm only a couple years older than you, but I need you to follow my lead. It's a very tough, delicate dance. And Cade has figured out, a way to 2-step it.
Yeah. And to your point, Johnny, I think like the thing that like really stood out to me since day one is there's a lot of players who talk about wanting to be the number 1 overall pick, but a player who wants to embrace being the franchise player in the face of a franchise day one is something that I don't think people truly understand, like the weight of. And like Cade came in, like, I think having the best understanding of what that meant, perhaps of a number 1 prospect I've seen in a long time, not just Detroit sports. I'm talking like the NBA. So I've just been blown away by that. And to your point, like, he's just like, he never seems complacent. He always seems like he knows he's got to be better in a lot of different areas, and he'll be the first one to tell you that. But also he just, no matter what's going on, he's like the same guy coming in every single day, which is like insanely impressive. But another guy who really was taking a lot of leaps this year, and before you brought up his injury, was Jaden Ivey. And Johnny, for my money, you had one of, if not the best call of the season in Sacramento when Jaden hit that and one shot that turned out to alter that franchise in Sacramento, perhaps for years to come. where does that call rank in your career highlights as far as, like the calls you've been a part of, and how much, because Pistons fans out the season's done, everyone's breaking out the trade machine. Everyone goes to, oh, well, what star can you go get, etc. But like, I would argue that if the Pistons did have a Jaden Ivey in this series, even an Isaiah Stewart, like you said, we could be potentially looking at them still playing, going into later in May.
No question. So the first part of that, let me just say, like, anytime you get a chance to put the headset on, and you mentioned George Blaha, obviously been the voice of your Pistons fandom, and anybody who's listening to this podcast, unless you're an octogenarian or something, maybe you listen to somebody else. But when you're earlier on in your play-by-play career, it's easier to kind of isolate some certain moments. So like that moment, it's a great privilege to wear the headset and to narrate a game, right? So, and you try to rise to meet the moment and then punctuate the big moments, and to win a game on a 4-point play at the end. You may get one of those in a career, and so that was special just because, how it happened, and then obviously the player involved. So that was one of the highlights of the year for sure, just from a team standpoint, because of what they did. Winning 3 out of 4 on that road trip was special. Yep. And Ivy's such a special guy, another guy who's measured, grounded, and to your point, but this is sports. That's how I was explaining to my mom the other day. I said, look, if he were healthy, maybe it changes things. If Isaiah Stewart could have played the duration of the series, it could have been different. But as Len Dawson, who I worked with, the Super Bowl IV MVP, the Kansas City Chiefs, he said, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. So you can't look at stuff and say, well, because every other team that's out there, it's like, well, yeah, that's just not the way sports works. You know what I mean? Yeah, you'd love to be 100% healthy and love to execute the game plan and do everything in order, but it doesn't always play out that way. So, but I do believe, with him healthy and with Isaiah, this team is even better than what it is, and that's like a scary thought, like a good scary thought, to know that, hey, you've got even more pieces that are like right there at the end of the bench that you don't have to go out and find because they're already here.
Yep.
And once they get healthy, it's like, hey, sky's the limit.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Johnny, just, with a guy who was around the team, often as well, is there anything that you want to share, any stories or memories from this season personally that you got to see that was a big turning point behind the scenes, maybe that we didn't necessarily see on the court for basketball fans, that you really saw, wow, this is a really special bunch. If that's a funny story, if that's a serious moment or whatever. Yeah,
well, I'll say, so we get to fly with the team, which is insane. And so I sit with George Blaha on every flight. And so, we talk like the entire time and just, look, this is my 11th season with the team. It's his 49th season. And so, again, I use the word privilege, and I'm not throwing that word around, but it's like when you get, like imagine that if I said, hey, Sean Troy, you're going to go on a, chartered flight to New York. You're going to sit with George, for the next hour.
Fans would probably bid $10,000.
Yeah, absolutely.
No joke.
Right. So it's like, well, that's just part of it, right? Like that's part of the, the privilege of being in this position. So we just have a great time, and we bring up old clips and, laughing about certain things or, just whatever, reminiscing about years past. And then with the team itself, you get to see these guys when, the microphones aren't around, aren't on and you don't have to be on, so to speak. Yep. But just watching the way they interact, it's probably like when you guys put the podcast together, you're like, well, we blend well. Like Troy and Sean, we blend well. I think we could do something here because we're both into it. We both have knowledge of it. And I think it could work. Sometimes when you get a team together, you say, okay, well, this guy's good, this guy's good, this guy's good, but they don't blend. You can see that. And so I remember there's a game, it should have been foreshadowing. It was when Cade went for the, 29-point triple-double in New York. And Michael Irvin was sitting right off courtside. And it was the first triple-double in that Madison Square Garden, because I think that garden was built like in 68. And anyway, after the game, before we did our post-game interview, Cade, walks up to me and like gave me a hug. And he's like, they got to stop playing with us, Johnny Kane. And I'm just like, yeah, no, I know. And then it's just like seeing that confidence, but it's not like, it's not, he's not boisterous, but it was like, they got to stop playing with us, like we're here kind of. It was like what I got from it. And then obviously they took 3 or 4 from the Knicks, and they obviously won in their building 4 times this year. In that moment, had I known that, like, hey, if I could have fast forward, because that was in November, I believe, if I would have said, hey, let's fast forward, 4 months or whatever, and now that's going to be your first round opponent. You'll be back at the Garden for the first time in your playoff career, with an opportunity to silence this crowd. Wouldn't that be something? And that's what ended up happening. Obviously, we came a game short, but just things like that, man. It's like those little moments, that aren't necessarily, they don't necessarily come across like, a game winning call or things like that. It's just the interactions you have with different guys. It's just like seeing, like, they're just regular people, just like everybody listening to this pod.
Yep.
And I know we all know that, but it's true. It's like, even, the superstars, whatever, they're just regular guys. They love basketball like we love basketball. And you just have a human connection with these different players and coaches. And it's just been special, man.
I think that is my favorite part of the media, of like the media experience, Johnny, is just seeing the hype and all of it, like, stripped down, and really just getting to see the human element of it all, and just like behind these, like the like just behind, like, and see the people behind these stories and behind all these, moments. And for me, that's just what makes this season just more special. Like, I can't help but be happy for the people in the back and behind the scenes, and everyone that, has to, like the social team that was having so much fun this year after all the comments and stuff they had to endure during the historic lows over the last few seasons. Like, to me, like, those are the things that I just, that like just stick out to me, of like, I'm just thrilled for those people, especially it's for you and for guys like George, where this was probably his last playoff game called in his career because of the RSN deal with, going forward with the NBA. And, like, that wouldn't have happened if this season didn't happen,
Right. No, you're all over it, man. It is one giant family, like, it really is, like, the social team. Look, Twitter can be a dark place sometimes, as we all know. It can be fun to engage, and sometimes you want to disengage. And, but to be able to share in that, and really ride the highs. I mean, we get into this career because of, you're hopeful to be a part of something special like this. And this was special. Yes, you hope to go to the playoffs for the next 10 years in a row, and maybe we will. But when it happens and it kind of comes out of nowhere, and you see the excitement on everybody, from the social team to the veteran broadcaster to the young superstar to whatever, the guy flying the plane, everybody's like, yeah, let's go get one tonight. And you're like, yeah, for sure. Like, that's cool to be a part of. It's just like one big happy family, really.
Yeah, exactly. Troy, I do want to give you another question, but I do just want to quick ask this, because I was able to get to know Greg Kelser a little bit this season, like, eat dinner with him and, like, talk to him. And the thing that strikes me is just how, at least, being able to interact with you, being able to interact with Greg, and even seeing George behind the scenes, like, just how you guys are the exact same person when the camera is rolling as when not, just as far as the energy, the enthusiasm, just how nice you guys, come off on TV. Like, you're that genuine guy in person. And to me, like, it almost, like, I think I know the answer, but what do you think is the secret of, like, why George Blaha and Greg Kelser have worked so well together for as long as they have? Because just that is a chemistry and a partnership in broadcasting that, quite frankly, I don't think, like, Pistons fans fully recognize, and probably won't recognize, unfortunately, until we no longer get to hear those two call games together. Like, what do you, just from working with those guys, what makes that work so well?
Yeah, that's a good one, man. Special K is my guy. He just texted me the other day. George just texted me yesterday, actually. And, for them to welcome me in, again, after a couple of years, I guess I had to wear them down anyway to be a part of that, to be a part of the group. But Special K is as genuine a person as you'd ever meet. He sees the game differently, and that's like what you want to see in an analyst. Obviously, as a former player, they all do. We always say they have a PhD in the game, because they watch the game differently. They've been in film rooms. They understand, like, like, they might pick up that a team drops into a 2-3 zone, a full 2 seconds before we do. And it's like, oh yeah, good point, Greg.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So they just work so well off each other. And, cause there's no ego involved, like with Special K. It's like, he sees it, explains it, George tees him up the right way. And they get along great, as we all do. It is cool, man. I think about a lot of different situations that I could have walked into just in my own personal career, because that's all I can really speak to, is like, I didn't know where I was going to end up, just like you guys don't know where you're going to end up ultimately, like
Mhm.
what it's like, am I at the right church? Am I covering the right team? Am I with the right girl or whatever it is? It's like, I'm so fortunate that like I ended up in Detroit working with those guys. You know what I'm saying? Our entire group, producer, director, stats, all that. But it's like to be welcomed in and to be able to play alongside with those guys. It's just been, I couldn't imagine, doing it with anybody else, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to find another broadcast team in the league that has that continuity, that level of experience together, that level of chemistry, and like you said, like just that little of ego, because it's just it's truly a special thing when you get that broadcast team right. You can't always just identify it. That's why ESPN's been scrambling for years to find their right studio show, and finally went and got inside the NBA, because you can't just replicate that.
Yeah, hey, that's it. Like in anything in life, so you serve the viewers. I mean, that's what we do, so it's like, how do you serve the viewers? Like if somebody just came in and said, hey, this is my show, here's how I'm going to do it, and you're like, okay, well, unless you resonate with 100% of your fan base, then you probably could stand to improve. But if you just say, hey, and it's like in calling games too, if I was just trying to throw in like my own catchphrase that I felt like, yeah, I got to force this in, or hey, I'm going to say this, or I'm going to hit this over the head. If you're doing it for a reason for yourself, but not for the audience, it's like, well, then what are you doing? What are we doing here? Like you are there to cater to and serve the fans. So if the game's great, let the game be great, and then accentuate it, punctuate it, and then lay out. But don't steal the show. You're not the show. You know what I'm saying? Like, right. Add to it, add to the experience, but it's not about you. And that's what I think there's a good understanding. And it's not like that everywhere. And I can't like specifically say like, and then over here, they've got it all wrong. But that's why I think it works so well here in Detroit, especially with the Pistons broadcast, because, you're basically, you're accentuating what's already an amazing product on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Broad question, Johnny, but I think Pistons fans want to know. Next year, 2025, 2026 season, I think all minds are there already right now. What can fans look forward to with the Detroit Pistons team? I mean, obviously building off of this past season, but what things do you, Johnny, hope to see more of next season?
Yeah, well, I'll say this, once you go, once you triple the win total, now all of a sudden, like I said, when you create your baseline there, it reminded me of a quick story. I remember when I was in college, I dated the same girl all through college. I met her like my second week down there. You don't have two nickels to rub together in college. I was at Ohio University.
OU.
Oh yeah.
Athens,
so
Ohio.
Anyway, my girlfriend at the time, my college girlfriend, she and her dad came down for, I guess dad's weekend or something. And then I had, gotten her a gift for Christmas, whatever, the first year. And it was like back when you could go to, the jewelry store, like Tiffany and Company.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So it was like a Tiffany, like charm bracelet or whatever. It was something that you could afford if you saved up for, but it wasn't like if you went to Tiffany now and tried to buy something, you need to, make sure you've really saved up. But anyway, I tell this story because I just remember it was like my first year, a couple months of dating, and I get her like this Tiffany bracelet, and her dad's like, hey, you've set a pretty high bar. Meaning like, what are you going to do next year? I was like, I hadn't really thought about that,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I say that meaning like with the Pistons and JB Bickerstaff and this team, you're like, well, wait a minute, like we're a playoff team now. There's no regressing. It's like the baseline, the bar has been set pretty high about what the expectations will be moving forward. So in a roundabout way to answer your question, I think it's no longer talk about the play-in. It's like, okay, if the 6th seed is now our baseline, how do we get into the top 4, right? And then how do you become the class of the Eastern Conference? Like Boston's doesn't look like it's going to regress, although they're going to have some decisions to make. Cleveland, same way. So how do you go get those teams in front of you, right? Indiana's great. New York, we obviously just saw is great. Milwaukee, they might blow it up. So, I always say this, you got to crawl before you walk. But because they've expedited this turnaround or this rebuild, there are realistic expectations. So, Trajan Langdon and those guys are going to have some decisions to make, obviously, in the offseason, because you say, can we just run it back with what we have? The one thing that in any type of executive role or leadership role, if you say, if everybody's healthy, what do we look like? Do we want to disrupt everything we have chemistry wise to go out and get a superstar to pair alongside Cade? Those are tough decisions to ask, because you say, well, I like what we have here. You're like, I know, but you have to give up 3 or 4 to go get 1.
Yep.
And you're like, okay, let me hear what the trade proposal is, right? Those are decisions. I'd like to be a fly on the wall like anybody else, where you say, is that realistic? Is that a good decision? Is that something we should do? I think this team is good enough when fully healthy to be a playoff team running it back next year. But as is always the case, they've got some decisions to make about who they re-sign, who they decide to target in free agency. And then you hope that young core continues to take a step forward. But what a time to be alive, you know?
Yeah, what a great problem to have versus the ones they've had in years past. And to me, it's like, it's such an interesting conversation, because you, like you said, you could go so many different routes with it. You know, like I think of teams like the Pacers who did strike at an opportunistic time, go get a Pascal Siakam and elevate their team to where now they're in the conference semifinals or conference finals conversation almost every single year. On the other hand, you have the Kings who waited too long, sat on their laurels, and watched their window kind of close before it even really opened, you know? So like, if you're the Pistons, you have a budding young star in Cade who, you know, his extension, I think, just now starts to kick in. You have the Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren conversations, and Trajan and his crew, they talked at the beginning of the season about how they can't take any shortcuts and how, you know, they need to see the plan out and do it the long and hard way. But they even admitted at the deadline that they had conversations about whether or not to go and get that type of player at the depth. So they already have had some of those conversations. So to me, I wonder if you're Trajan and, you know, like Michael Blackstone, like the rest of the members of the Pistons front office, like, how hard is it to keep sitting on your hands and potentially, you know, watch some of those opportunities pass you by when you're like, wait a second, what could this team be if we go and add, say, like a young and like budgeting star off the trade market, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, and I love Mike Blackstone and Trajan, those guys. I mean, again, you go out and get a Dennis Schroeder at the trade deadline, which obviously provided huge dividends, you know, down the stretch. You know, and that wasn't a splashy, right, deadline acquisition, but it was what this team needed at this time. So now, you know, they'll reassess everything, and that's obviously that's what they're there to do. So I think you listen to everybody is in anything. Somebody says, "Hey, man, when's the last time you got a random text that says, you know, hey, I'm interested in selling your home?" And you're like, "I hadn't really thought about that." And then they're like, "We'll give you whatever," and you're like, "Well, okay, I'll listen." You know what I mean? Yep. So you guys listen to everything, but it's got to make sense in the short term, the near term, and the long term. And I think this organization, the way it's set up, is they could be good for a long time. You don't want to just say, hey, like, let's roll the dice and let's go get this splashy acquisition. Let's see, because our window's closing, we got to win, you know, in 25, 26. We got to go do it because our franchise, you know, guy, his contract's up. So we got to go make a splash move right now, and we're going to mortgage our future on that. So those are all the decisions they have to make. They're in a good spot where you've got control over a lot of the players that you'd like to see, you know, maintain in the core, and then deciding, you know, who to surround you with.
Yeah. Troy, you have anything?
No, I guess, you know, just one last, you know, little question here is, I guess we talked about him a little bit already, but you have one singular, just great George Blaha story for us.
Well, it'd be tough to isolate one. He's a great joke teller. I can tell you that much.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think about this.
While you're thinking, I can just say the thing that stands out to me with seeing George in the background is just the respect and the admiration that people have for him still. And just even like getting to see Chauncey when he came back for Chauncey night and seeing George and him interact and just seeing the admiration, the mutual respect there, like the picture of him and Doris Burke at game 1 at the Garden interacting together. I think for me, the cool thing to see has been how much respect George really has around the league. To me personally, that's like something that stood out, was really cool to see.
Yeah, I'll say this, man, because if you go back and look, it's like anything in life where, you know, you're like, well, I knew him at this point in time, right? So some people can say, yeah, like I've been listening to George for the last 20 years. Some people have been listening to him the last 40 years. So when you have a body of work as deep as his, your first championship is always incredible. Like I remember the first time I had a chance to cover a champion was in 2008. I was covering Kansas basketball. And like the night they cut down the Nets in San Antonio was one of the greatest nights of my life. And it was like the pinnacle of my professional career at that point. And it was Mario Chalmers and the boys. They knocked off Derrick Rose and Memphis Tigers in overtime. Erased a 9-point deficit with 2:12 to play. Anyway, it was unbelievable. And I remember I cried that night. I was like, this is it. Like it doesn't get any better than this. And then the longer you're in the profession, obviously some other great opportunities come your way. So like for George, when you're calling that first championship, right? And then you run it back with the bad boys, then you come back with the going to work guys. That's always a part of your life. And so when he goes back into his, treasure box of like memories, when you see guys like Grant Hill come over and give him a hug, or Rip, Chauncey, all those guys, Isaiah, it's like there's a connection there that'll always be there. And to still have the same passion to be calling the same team for almost 5 decades, I guess longer than all of us have been alive, right? Maybe not combined, but you know what I'm saying? Like
Not far off though.
not far off. And so you say like, man, like that just doesn't happen, right? I mean, you start thinking about some of the legendary broadcasters, like, but to be associated with one team for that long, he's earned the right to call as long as he wants, and like that. So that's like the thing about George is like we asked, there's some funny stories like I could share, but it's like watching somebody, it's something that I would love to be able to do is like, imagine if your entire career, if you said the name Detroit Pistons, you're like, yeah, George Blaha. Yeah. Right. How many different coaches you've had along the way, players, front office, all that. But the one constant has been him on the mic. And so that's what's pretty special is watching like the level of work, the attention to detail, the passion that still exists to want to continue to do it this late in life when most people want to retire. And you're like, retire from what? A dream?
Yep.
I don't want to wake up. You know what I mean? Like, why would you want to walk away from a literal dream existence? And you're like, well, that's why he hasn't yet,
Yeah, exactly. And I echo that sentiment all the time on the pod that George is more than earned. He gets to go out on his terms, and anyone that says otherwise, I think you're massively disrespecting a legendary career.
Yeah.
Johnny, before I do have one more question just about the craft of what you do and just kind of the art of putting together that type of broadcast, because I think the best ones are the ones that make it look seamless and effortless and make it look like any of those conversations that you might be having, like with your friends when you're watching a game. But the truth of the matter is that when you're doing a broadcast for a game, and this way better than I do, but I'm just someone who admires the space and that type of work. It takes so much preparation and so much detail you have to have material if they're up 50, if they're down 50, if you have to be prepared if Bobby Klintman comes in and plays his first game in 3 or 4 months. What's the thing about working, doing what you do that people maybe don't understand or appreciate, what's the, because I've seen firsthand, you work really hard and are very diligent. Like what's the secret to being as good in this space as you've become? Because it's a real art.
Yeah, no, I think it is an art, man. And it's like I said, if you approach it as a privilege as opposed to anything else, then it's like, okay, there's one guy calling the game tonight, right? And if you look at the NBA as a whole, you say there are 30 jobs in the world to call NBA play-by-play on a nightly basis. Yes, there's national broadcasters or whatever. But if you just said there's only one guy attached to each team, there's 30 jobs in the world. And tonight you're putting the headset on and it's an empty canvas. What do you have? The privilege is yours today. And you say, whew, if you weren't obsessed with the prep work to go into it and you're looking down at your sheet, like you said, like Bobby Klintman or whatever, and you're like, okay, let's see, where did he go to school? Okay, what's his size and weight? And you're doing that in real time and the game's like boom, boom. And once you fall behind in the NBA, it's so fast.
Yep.
You're cooked. And then the viewers at home are like, he didn't really hit that call, or he missed that, or he misidentified him. It's like, what are you doing? Like that's your job that day. Like that's a privilege to do it. And so you have to be obsessed with the prep work. Like, and I always say, it's like, even last night, or any night you're watching an NBA game, you're studying, right? You're prepping. So when you get to the arena, it's like you've got inherent knowledge that's already there. It's built in because I've been watching. I know what's happening. I know trends. So if you were always just down at your notes, then you haven't really gone over the subject matter enough. Like you shouldn't be down like this. You should be up here and everything's happening. And then in a moment, if you need to go down, okay, boom, I can isolate here. And now I can add something in here. So that's where I think, again, as you go along in a career, like doing play-by-play, let's say for a high school football state finals, you've got 11 on offense, 11 on defense. There's 22 kids on the field that you probably haven't watched all season long. So you don't have that built in, like you can look on the floor. And if you said to any random person in the crowd, you're like, point out Cade Cunningham right there.
Yep.
When you're doing like a high school broadcast, there's 22 new kids on the field in a helmet and you're like, point out so-and-so. And it's like, where am I looking? Right. Mm-hmm. So it's different when you get to the NBA at that level, you pretty much have like name association and recognition just by seeing the players that you don't have to like always be going to your notes. Right. So you should be able to call it a little bit more freely than you would at a smaller level of a broadcast. So it is a delicate dance, man. And it's like, sometimes like the one thing I try to work on is economy of words. You don't have to like jumble it up by saying too much. Sometimes I feel like I have a tendency of doing that. It's like one of the greats of my childhood, Marv Albert, it's like Jordan for 3. Yes. Mm-hmm. That was the whole possession. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and that was perfect because we're all watching. We all see what's happening. You don't have to tell me like where he caught it, what he's doing. So it's things like that. It's finding like what is the right balance. And sometimes saying less is the right call. Most of the time saying less is the right call. But when that crescendo hits, right, and you're rising to meet the moment, if you're not ready, if you're down in your notes and you miss it, and it's like you may only get one of those, and then it's like you've done a disservice to the fans. You know what I mean? To everybody watching. So be ready for it. Be ready for the moment, and make sure you're highlighting the stars of the show, which are the guys on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely, Johnny. That was absolute gold. And this was a really fun episode. Seriously, you've always just been super gracious with your time, and just with everything in general. If I ever have any questions, advice, ever want to chat, you're always just so open to to be a resource. So seriously, man, the city of Detroit's always just been super lucky to have you, in the universe, and as part of our sports world. And seriously, dude, just thank you so much for coming on and taking the time today. This was a lot of fun.
No, I really appreciate it, man. Seriously, I appreciate everything you said, and it's a blessing to be here in Detroit, covering these teams, man. It really is. So every day I wake up, my feet hit the ground. I'm like, how'd we get here? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
you guys do a great job too, man. So it's like working in this industry is the greatest thing that I could ever imagine. So you never want to become jaded. You never want to take any of it for granted. So I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Appreciate you. And thank you to those that listen and support, throughout the community. If you like what we do here, be sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content we have coming. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you're subscribed.